When I got married, I never told anyone that I'd inherited 3 apartments from my grandmother. And thank goodness I stayed silent, because just a week later, my mother-in-law showed up with a notary. Imagine that. Only 7 days after saying I do, she arrived at my door, not with flowers, but with legal documents in hand. That moment confirmed my biggest fear. I had to keep my secret buried. The doorbell's sharp ringing broke the calm of the morning. I muttered, "Who's knocking this early?" It was already 10 a.m., but Nathan and I were still enjoying that newlywed comfort. I hurried to the door, barely turning the lock before she appeared. Margaret Thompson, my mother-in-law, perfectly styled in a tailored pantsuit, expression serious. Next to her stood a small, uneasy man holding a leather briefcase, obviously a notary or lawyer. "Victoria," she said in a firm tone, "we need to talk. This is Samuel Wilson, a family friend and notary. I think it's time we take care of a few things." My stomach dropped. "A few things? A week after the wedding?" I asked, trying to sound calm. I hadn't told anyone about my inheritance. 3 apartments spread across the city, left to me by my grandmother. It wasn't about greed. I just didn't like people digging into personal finances. More than anything, I didn't want money to interfere with my marriage. I wanted Nathan to love me, not what I owned. "Good morning, Margaret," I said, forcing a polite smile as I let them inside our apartment. "Come in, Samuel. Nice to meet you." I tried to stay composed, though my mind was racing. Was she here to make me sign something? A promissory note? A prenup? It had only been a week. Margaret walked in like she owned the place, scanning everything critically. With a quick gesture, she signaled me to seat her guest. I led them to the living room, then rushed to the kitchen to make tea and set out cookies. My hospitality felt mechanical, but I knew it was expected. "Victoria, where's Nathan?" she asked as she settled on the couch. "He had to step out for a bit, but he'll be back soon." I lied. He'd just gone to the store, but I needed time to figure out what was going on. While I poured tea, she made her usual comment. "Things still aren't quite in order here. Young couples never understand how to keep a proper home, but we'll fix that later." I ignored it, offering a strained smile. Then her tone changed. "Victoria, now that you're part of the family, we thought it's time to handle a few legal details. You're married now. We just want to prevent any future misunderstandings about property." She nodded at the notary, who looked ready to sink into the couch. "Samuel has prepared some papers. It's all about fairness and transparency." I tensed up. "What kind of papers, Margaret? What exactly are we discussing?" "Oh, nothing major," she said lightly. "Just a prenuptial agreement and a note confirming that if anything ever happens, property acquired during marriage will be split evenly. And of course, we wanted to clarify whether you had any assets before the wedding." My heart froze. There it was. She was digging. But I was ready for this. I smiled. "Assets? Well, I saved a little for the wedding, and I've got some small savings. Nothing big." "I see," she said, clearly unconvinced. "And property? Did you own anything before the marriage?" I nearly snapped, but stayed calm. "No, nothing serious. I used to live with my grandmother before she passed away, but her apartment was small. It went to my parents. That part was true, at least technically. That apartment had gone to them. But the other 3, the nicer ones, were all in my name. A secret between me and the notary who handled the will." "So nothing?" Margaret repeated, narrowing her eyes, as if she couldn't believe her son married someone so ordinary. "All right then, Samuel, show her the agreement." I skimmed the papers. Most of it looked standard, joint property, divorce clauses, until one line stood out. If one spouse is later found to have significant assets, those assets will be considered joint property unless explicitly declared as premarital. My stomach turned. They were trying to trap me. If I admitted to anything later, I'd automatically lose half. But if I denied it now, I was legally binding myself to that lie. "I'll need to discuss this with Nathan," I said firmly, returning the papers. "I'm not signing anything without him." Margaret hesitated, then smiled tightly. "Of course, dear. Talk to your husband. I'm sure he agrees with me. It's just for your peace of mind, right, Samuel?" The notary nodded nervously. "If we're signing today, we'll need to do it before lunch. I have other appoint." Just then, the door opened. Nathan walked in, holding groceries, his eyes widening when he saw them. "Mom, what's going on? Why's there a notary here?" I raised my hand as if to say, "Don't ask me." Margaret immediately launched into her speech, claiming she only wanted to protect his future. Nathan listened quietly, then said, "Mom, I told you not to interfere. Victoria's my wife. We'll handle things ourselves." She frowned. "I'm just trying to help. You can't be too careful these days." "What if Victoria has debts or hidden wealth?" Nathan looked at me, trying to gauge my reaction. My pulse raced, but I stayed calm. "If she does, I don't care," he said finally. "I love her, not her money. And Mom, that's enough." Margaret pursed her lips, but stood up clearly offended. "Fine. Do what you want, Samuel. Sorry for wasting your time." She left, followed by the awkward notary. The relief I felt as the door clicked shut was overwhelming. Nathan came over and hugged me. "I'm sorry she acted like that." "It's okay," I said softly. "She's just worried." But inside, I knew for sure I'd never tell anyone about those apartments. Not yet. Keeping quiet had saved me once, and it would again. That was the start of our marriage, with a not-so-subtle warning from my mother-in-law. And it was only the beginning of a long, messy family saga. Margaret wasn't planning to back down. She wanted control over our family, our finances, even our home. Her behavior swung between sweet and critical. Some days she'd bring flowers and invite us to dinner. Others, she'd scold me over tiny things. Looking back, every chapter of our early marriage played out like a soap opera, full of secrets, tension, and emotion. And yes, I had one big secret: the apartments my grandmother had left me. Before I met Nathan, my life was simple and steady. I grew up in a family of engineers. My dad worked as an electrician, and my mom was a design engineer. We weren't wealthy, but we managed comfortably. I studied economics at university and took on part-time jobs to support myself. My family was easygoing, especially my grandmother. She played a huge role in shaping who I became. She always encouraged me to be independent, confident, and resourceful. "You can achieve anything if you think smart," she used to say. My grandmother was a remarkable woman. During tough times, she and my grandfather tried different ways to make ends meet: sewing, trading rare goods under the table, doing whatever they could to stay afloat. When the economy improved, she started investing in real estate, buying small apartments, renting them out, and occasionally selling for a profit. She had great intuition and just enough luck to build something meaningful. Later in life, she decided to make a will, though she kept it hidden from everyone. My parents disapproved of her business dealings, calling them too risky, and it strained their relationship. But she trusted me. A week before she passed, she called me to meet her notary. Already weak, she told me she wanted to make sure her hard work didn't go to waste. That day, I signed the documents naming me as the sole heir to 3 apartments. Her will specified that I could only take full ownership after her death. When she passed, I handled everything legally and quietly. My parents assumed the apartments had been sold or left to someone else, and I didn't correct them. I didn't want the family to fight or gossip. My grandmother had seen enough of that and warned me about it. She told me, "Nothing destroys family peace faster than greed." Back then, I thought she was being overly cautious. But now, looking at Margaret's behavior, I realized she was absolutely right. I met Nathan during my 2nd year at university. He was a graduate physics student, intelligent, kind, and surprisingly grounded for someone so brilliant. Despite being deeply into theoretical work, he was active, funny, and caring. We clicked almost instantly. He treated me with genuine warmth, always making me laugh, calling me his lucky charm. I also saw how deeply he respected his mother. Since his father was often away in the military, Margaret had practically raised him alone. To Nathan, she was a hero, and I respected that at first. What I didn't realize was how much influence she still had over him. Nathan and I dated for years before deciding to marry. Even during our engagement, Margaret was deeply involved. She had an opinion on everything: my dress, my hairstyle, the cake, the guest list. I stayed patient, choosing my battles carefully. In the end, the wedding turned out beautiful, though I felt her presence in every detail. I told myself it didn't matter as long as Nathan and I were happy. Nothing else would interfere. After the wedding, we moved into the apartment Nathan's parents had given us. It was technically bought by his father years earlier, still under his name, but recently renovated and very comfortable. The only problem was that it never felt entirely ours. Margaret and his father both had keys, and Margaret often stopped by unannounced, claiming she wanted to water the plants, drop off pie, or check if we needed anything. I tried to be polite, though inside I longed for privacy, for a home that truly belonged to us. I could have easily suggested one of my apartments, but saying, "Let's move into one of my places," would have exposed everything. Nathan would have questions, and Margaret would find a way to control even that. So I waited. Then came that morning when she arrived with the notary, just 1 week after the wedding. My secret nearly slipped out, but I managed to keep it buried. Nathan handled the situation calmly, refusing to sign the prenup and standing up to his mother. "We love each other," he said. "I'm not planning on getting divorced, so why worry about property?" He even joked, "If Mom's so concerned, maybe she should sign a prenup with Dad." We laughed it off and decided to move forward, ignoring her behavior. But of course, Margaret didn't stop. She started visiting more often, pointing out every minor flaw. "Why are there dishes in the sink? You were out late last night. Where were you?" I tried to keep my patience, though at times I snapped. Nathan always tried to smooth things over, but her presence became constant tension in our marriage. Then one afternoon, something happened that stayed with me. Nathan was at work, and I was home studying for a certification program linked to my new consulting job. Margaret appeared without warning, sat down in the kitchen, and gave me a long look. "Victoria, you do realize you can't rely on Nathan's salary alone, right?" she said. I looked up from my laptop. "I work too. My pay isn't high yet, but it'll grow." She shook her head. "You're still studying. You'll need to think about the future, bills, children, the household. Love doesn't pay the mortgage." "We'll manage," I replied calmly. "It's just the two of us for now. If anything comes up, my parents can help." She raised an eyebrow. "Your parents? They're not exactly well off, are they?" I stayed quiet. My parents weren't wealthy, true, but I didn't appreciate her tone. "Margaret," I said finally, "please don't worry. We'll figure things out." "Oh, your generation makes it sound so simple," she sighed, sipping her tea. "But you need to plan ahead. Take this apartment, for example. It's in my husband's name, but one day it'll be Nathan's. And if there's ever a divorce—" "Why are you jumping straight to divorce?" I interrupted, my patience gone. "I'm not implying anything," she said smoothly. "Life is unpredictable. Anything can happen. Tell me, do you or your family have any property or savings?" "Where would that come from?" I shrugged. "I'm only 23. I just started working." She leaned forward slightly. "But didn't your grandmother have money? Maybe she left you something?" Her words hit me like a chill. She was fishing again, testing me. "My grandmother left us memories, some furniture, and a few keepsakes," I said firmly. "I see," Margaret replied slowly. "People used to say she was quite the businesswoman. I just wondered if she set something aside for you. If she did, we know nothing about it," I answered flatly. She studied my face, searching for cracks, but I didn't blink. "Well, if you say so," she said, finally standing. "Tell Nathan I dropped by. Ask him to call me." When she left, I exhaled deeply. Once again, I realized that telling her the truth would be like handing her a weapon. She'd use it to control every decision we made. After that awkward encounter, things quieted down for a while. Margaret didn't visit for nearly 2 weeks, and I almost started to believe she'd finally backed off. Nathan and I settled into our new routine, working, cooking together, watching shows at night. We were building something real. My job was going well. I worked as a junior analyst for a small consulting firm. The hours were long, but I liked the pace. I was surrounded by smart people who pushed me to do better. It felt good to finally be doing something meaningful. Every morning, Nathan left for his lab at the university, and I took the metro downtown. Sometimes I'd get home first and cook dinner. Sometimes he did. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. For the first time, I felt like our life was truly ours, even if we were still living in his parents' apartment. Then, slowly, the peace started to fade. It began with little things. Margaret would accidentally call Nathan during dinner, asking if he'd eaten, or stop by on weekends under the pretense of checking the heating. She never directly argued, but she had a way of making me feel like I didn't belong. She'd rearrange dishes, fold laundry differently, or comment on how I kept the place. One time, she walked in and said, "Oh, Victoria, you changed the curtains? The old ones were warmer." I smiled politely and said, "Yes, I thought these brightened the room." She just nodded, as if humoring a child. Nathan tried to keep the peace. He loved his mother, but he also saw what was happening. After she left one day, he sat beside me and said quietly, "I'm sorry. She's just used to managing everything." "I know," I replied, "but it's hard to feel at home when she walks in any time she wants." He nodded. "You're right, I'll talk to her." And to his credit, he did. But even after that, nothing really changed. She'd always find a new excuse. "I thought I left my sweater here," or "I needed to drop off Nathan's favorite tea." I started counting her visits. 6 times in 2 weeks. That's when I brought up the idea of moving. "Nathan," I said one evening, "what if we rent our own place, just for a while? Somewhere nearby, but private. We both work now. We can manage the rent." He hesitated. You don't like it here. It's not that, I said carefully. It just doesn't feel like ours. Every time I sit on this couch, I imagine your mom picking out the fabric. It feels like we're guests. He thought about it for a while, then nodded slowly. Okay, maybe after the new year, we'll start looking. I smiled, relieved. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful. But of course, nothing is ever that simple when Margaret is involved. A week later, Nathan came home looking uneasy. Mom invited us to dinner Sunday, he said. She wants to introduce you to someone, her cousin's daughter, Elizabeth. Elizabeth? I asked. Why? She said Elizabeth's moving to the city and needs advice about finding work. Since you're in consulting, she thought you could help. Right, I muttered, because she couldn't possibly just ask me herself. Nathan smiled awkwardly. Come on, it's just dinner. We'll be polite, stay an hour, and leave. Sunday came, and I dressed neatly. Nothing fancy, but enough to look presentable. Margaret's house was spotless as always, full of family portraits and meticulously arranged china. Elizabeth turned out to be around my age, cheerful, blonde, and instantly friendly. We talked about jobs, housing, and life in the city. She was sweet, a little naive, but genuinely nice. I could see why Margaret liked her. She was exactly her type, polite, obedient, and eager to please. After dinner, while Nathan was helping his mother clear the table, Margaret turned to me and said, "Elizabeth's such a lovely girl, isn't she? So well-mannered." She is, I agreed. Seems like she'll do well here. I'm sure she will, Margaret replied with a smile. In fact, she'll be staying with us for a while until she finds her own place. Nathan offered to help her get settled. I blinked. He did? Margaret nodded. Oh, don't worry, dear. It's only temporary. Something about the way she said, "Don't worry, dear," made my stomach twist. Later, on the way home, I asked Nathan, "Did you really offer to help Elizabeth move in?" He frowned. No, Mom just said she needed a place for a week or two, so I told her I'd help carry boxes. Boxes, I repeated. And where exactly is she staying? At Mom's. Why? No reason, I said. But in my gut, I knew better. Margaret didn't do anything without a reason, and soon that reason would become painfully clear. At first, I didn't think much about Elizabeth moving in with Margaret. She seemed harmless, quiet, polite, and always eager to help. But within a few weeks, her presence started to overlap with ours in ways that didn't feel accidental. It began with texts from Margaret. Elizabeth says Nathan helped her assemble furniture, one message read. Another said, "You're so lucky, Victoria. Your husband's such a gentleman. He even drove Elizabeth to the hardware store today." I tried to shrug it off. Nathan had a good heart. Helping someone wasn't unusual for him. But the frequency of it bothered me. He started mentioning Elizabeth casually in conversation. Little things like, "Elizabeth got the same brand of coffee we like," or "Mom said Elizabeth's settling in well." Soon she was appearing at our place too. At first, she came by to return something Nathan lent her, or drop off cookies from Margaret. She always smiled sweetly and complimented everything. My outfit, my decor, my cooking. "You're so elegant, Victoria," she'd say. "Nathan's lucky to have someone like you." The words were kind, but the tone always felt off. A few days later, Margaret called me unexpectedly. Her voice was calm, but carried a hint of something else. Something deliberate. "Victoria, dear," she said, "I hope you don't mind, but I asked Nathan to help Elizabeth with a few errands this week. She doesn't know the city well, and I'd hate for her to get lost." "That's fine," I said carefully. as long as it doesn't interfere with his work. "Oh, of course not," Margaret replied. "You know Nathan. He's always so dependable. I suppose Elizabeth reminds him of his little sister." Nathan, but it was. It reached a breaking point one Friday night when I came home early from work. Nathan wasn't home yet. I walked into the kitchen and found a wrapped box of pastries on the counter, with a note in neat handwriting. "For Nathan, thank you for the ride today. You're the best, Elizabeth." My hands shook as I read it. I didn't want to be jealous or paranoid, but something about this wasn't right. When Nathan returned, I handed him the box silently. He looked startled. "Oh, that's from Elizabeth. I gave her a lift to her interview." "That's thoughtful," I said quietly. "But why is she always the one who needs your help?" He sighed. "You're overthinking it again." "No," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I'm seeing it. Your mom's pushing her into our lives, and you're letting her." Nathan rubbed his temples. "Vic, you're stressed. Maybe you should take a break from work. Mom's not trying to hurt anyone." That's when I realized something painful. Margaret didn't have to turn Nathan against me. She just had to make him doubt me, make him believe I was the problem. From that point on, I started documenting everything. Texts, visits, subtle remarks. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was survival. Because the more I watched, the more I noticed how orchestrated it all felt. Elizabeth wasn't just a cousin's daughter. She was a pawn, one Margaret had carefully placed between us. I wish I could say things improved after that night, but they didn't. In fact, everything got worse. Nathan began working later and later. At first, he said it was because of a new project at the lab. I wanted to believe him, but soon there were small inconsistencies, calls he'd take in another room, vague explanations about meetings, and a growing distance between us. Margaret's presence, though less visible, was everywhere. She'd stopped visiting as often, but somehow I felt her hand in everything. The way Nathan avoided certain topics, the way he suddenly questioned my decisions, even the cold silences that had begun to fill our evenings. Then, one morning, while Nathan was showering, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I don't usually check his messages. I respect privacy. But something inside me hesitated, then acted. The screen lit up with a text. "Elizabeth, thanks again for yesterday. I really don't know what I'd do without you." My chest tightened. There were no hearts or obvious flirting, just familiarity. Too much of it. When Nathan came out, towel around his neck, I asked casually, "Did you see Elizabeth again?" He looked up, surprised. "Yeah, just to help her fix her Wi-Fi." "Why?" "Her Wi-Fi," I repeated. "You sure you're not her full-time technician now?" He frowned. "Vic, don't start." "I'm not starting anything," I said quietly. "I'm just noticing patterns." He sighed, grabbed his jacket, and left without another word. That day, I didn't go to work. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pastries still in the fridge, and started thinking. About Margaret, about Elizabeth, about the way every step of this had been planned. Gently, quietly, like a spider weaving its web. So I decided to do something I'd been avoiding for months. Visit Margaret myself. When I arrived, she greeted me with that same perfect smile, polite, practiced, hollow. "Victoria, what a surprise! Come in, dear." Her home smelled like lavender and furniture polish, every surface shining. I sat on the couch while she poured tea as if we were old friends. "I haven't seen much of you lately," she said. "I was starting to think you were avoiding me." I smiled thinly. "You've been busy with Elizabeth." "Oh, she's lovely, isn't she? Margaret said with a sigh. So helpful. She reminds me of myself when I was young. I leaned back. That must be nice, to have someone who listens to you so well. She glanced at me, her expression barely shifting. What are you implying, dear? Nothing, I said softly. Just that it's impressive how much influence you have. Over people, over situations. Her eyes hardened for a split second before softening again. You sound paranoid, Victoria. Maybe the stress of work is getting to you. I looked her in the eye. I know you're trying to push me out. She set her teacup down gently, the sound sharp in the silence. I don't have to push anyone. People who don't belong tend to remove themselves. The room felt suddenly cold. Be careful, she added quietly. Marriage is fragile. Words can destroy it faster than any betrayal. I stood up. Thanks for the advice. As I left, I saw movement by the stairs. Elizabeth, standing halfway up, pretending she hadn't been listening. That was the moment everything became clear. Margaret wasn't just manipulating Nathan. She was grooming a replacement. Someone more compliant, more controllable. Someone who would never question her authority. And Nathan, blinded by loyalty, couldn't see it. Over the next few days, I began noticing new things. Nathan started spending nights at the lab. But sometimes, when I called, his phone went straight to voicemail. Once, I even heard Margaret's voice faintly in the background of one of his calls. It was like they were closing ranks, building a version of reality that didn't include me. So I made a decision. Quietly, carefully, I began preparing an exit plan. I transferred my savings to a separate account and visited one of my grandmother's apartments for the first time in years. It was small but cozy, a place untouched by Margaret's reach. When I stood in that empty room, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. I didn't tell Nathan. Not yet. I wanted proof, something undeniable. And it came sooner than I expected. The next weekend, Nathan said he was spending the day at his mother's to help with some repairs. That evening, as I sat in the apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So I drove there, slowly, carefully, parking across the street. Through the lit window, I saw them. Nathan, Margaret, and Elizabeth, sitting around the table, laughing. Margaret leaned in to whisper something, and Nathan smiled at Elizabeth, not at his mother. Elizabeth reached out and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. I don't remember driving home, just the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. By the time he returned that night, I was gone. I moved out the next morning. No argument, no scene, just a short note on the counter and my wedding ring beside it. I took only the essentials, a suitcase, my laptop, and a box of files from work. For the first few weeks, I stayed in my grandmother's smallest apartment, the one no one else knew about. It was sparsely furnished, with peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of old cedar. But it was mine. The quiet there felt like safety. Nathan called once. I didn't answer. Then came a text. Please talk to me. Mom's worried. I stared at the screen for a long time before deleting it. After that, silence. I threw myself into work, trying to fill every hour. I repainted the walls, bought new dishes, rearranged the furniture until the place looked different enough to feel like a new beginning. At night, I'd walk to the small grocery store 2 blocks away, just to remind myself that the world still moved on without me. But the quiet didn't last. One evening, I came home and found a white envelope slipped under my door. No address, no stamp. Inside was a single photo, me, leaving the office earlier that day. The picture was crisp, taken from across the street. I stood there for a long time, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I told myself it could have been a random mistake, someone testing a new camera maybe. But deep down, I knew better. 2 nights later, the phone in the apartment rang once, then stopped. When I checked the call log, it said unknown number. Then, the next morning, a bouquet appeared outside my door. White lilies, my grandmother's favorite. There was a small note tucked between the stems. "You're not alone." No signature. I reported it to the building manager. He said he hadn't seen anyone unusual, but the mailroom cameras had been flickering all week. "Probably a wiring issue," he said. I almost laughed. My dad would have said the same thing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. At night, I'd hear faint sounds in the hallway, slow footsteps that stopped just beyond my door, as if someone were listening. Once, around 2 a.m., I caught a glimpse of movement through the peephole. A shadow, tall, still, unmistakably human. By the time I opened the door, the hallway was empty. I started sleeping with the lights on. One afternoon, as I left for work, the neighbor across the hall stopped me, an older man I'd barely spoken to. "You've got visitors a lot lately," he said casually. "Friends of yours?" "What do you mean?" I asked. He frowned. "A woman and a younger girl, knocked a few times when you weren't home. The older one said she was your mother." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Did she give a name?" He shook his head. "Polite though, smiled the whole time." That evening, I installed an extra lock and started keeping the curtains drawn. I changed my route to work, switched to a new number, even considered moving again. But I couldn't shake the thought that none of it would help, because Margaret didn't lose. She waited, she planned, and she always got what she wanted. A month later, a letter arrived at my office. The handwriting was elegant, too familiar. "You can run, Victoria, but family always finds its way back." There was no return address, just a faint scent of lavender clinging to the paper. That night, I packed a small bag, locked the apartment, and left the city. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I drove until dawn, into the mountains my grandmother used to love, somewhere no one would think to look. Even here, in the silence and the snow, I sometimes wake up convinced I hear footsteps outside the cabin. And when I do, I remember Margaret's last words to me. "People who don't belong tend to remove themselves." Maybe she was right. Maybe I've already been erased. Just another quiet ending she orchestrated perfectly. They found this letter sealed inside a tin box near the edge of a frozen lake, about 40 miles from town. The cabin it came from was abandoned. No footprints, no vehicle, no sign of struggle. Just this note, folded neatly on the table beside a cup of cold tea. If someone ever reads this, my name is Victoria Thompson. I left the city to get away, to start over, far from everything that went wrong. But peace isn't something you can escape to. It either lives with you or it doesn't live at all. For a while, I thought I was safe here. No neighbors, no visitors. The snow covered everything, even the sound of my own footsteps. I learned the rhythm of silence, the creak of wood, the faint hum of wind against the windows. But lately, the quiet feels different, heavier. At first, it was the phone, a landline I never used. It would ring once, then stop. Always once, always at 3:17 a.m. When I picked it up, there was no sound, just the soft click of someone hanging up. Then came the footprints. They appeared overnight, leading from the woods to my door, but never back. Each morning, the snow erased them, and each night they returned. I tried not to panic. I told myself it was wildlife, branches falling, tricks of the light. But last night, I woke to a knock, 3 short taps. I didn't open the door. This morning, I found a small envelope under the mat. Inside was a pressed white lily, and on the bat of the flower petal, written in faint pencil, "You shouldn't have lied." I burned it in the fireplace, but the smoke smelled like lavender. Now, the cabin feels smaller each day. The windows seem to hum when the wind hits them, and the shadows move before the light does. Sometimes I think I hear my grandmother's voice, soft, warning, just like before she passed. Don't let them take what's yours. But what if what's mine is exactly what they came for? There's something standing outside tonight. I can feel it. The air thickens when it's near. I don't think it's Margaret anymore. Or maybe it never was. Maybe greed doesn't die. Maybe it just changes shape. If anyone finds this, don't look for me. Don't come to this cabin. I've locked the door, but it's already inside. The last sound I'll hear is the ringing of that single phone call. And maybe then, the snow will finally be quiet again.